And let's admit. Oh, hang on. I'll sort the lobby out as well. Admit all.
Love the way you've got your proper WPS advisory background, Richard.
Oh yeah, all organised.
There you go. There you go. Morning, Alina. Morning, Clive. Morning, Michael. Morning, Nicola. Morning, Peter. 2 Peters. And thanks for joining. There's a few others coming in. If you've just joined, if you could mute, please, that would be great. Just to cut out any background noise. Morning, Billy. Morning,
hello.
Morning, Paul. Good to see you. Morning, Shay. If you could just mute, please, that'd be great. Just to cut out any background noise, and then we can start. Okay. Let's just see. There's a few more. Yeah, that's good. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Well, I'll monitor the lobby. Before we start, just to say to everybody, we are recording. So can we have a thumbs up that everybody's happy? Billy, you happy that we're recording? Big thumbs up. Yeah, I think your thumbs up. Oh, there it is. I can see it now. So there we go. So we are recording. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, welcome everyone to this morning's coffee morning. We we really are delighted to have on board Richard Walter and Simon Crystal, both from WPS Advisory. And the chair of the panel, Podreg Floyd, is not quite here yet, but we can start without him. That's fine. Today's session, as you probably have seen on the invitation, is the FCA wielding the sledgehammer? And I think this is a panel discussion, but as usual, Playpen, I like debate and I like to bring people in. So we'll open the chat up, and if you want to make any comments in the chat, that's great. Alternative, if you'd like to agree or disagree or make a point, please raise a hand in usual fashion, and we can see where it goes. We will finish at 11:30 on the dot. That's the usual time frame. So thanks very much to everybody for joining, and welcome to this event. For everybody else's benefit, maybe Richard, do you want to introduce yourself and just sort of a small background? I know it's your birthday tomorrow, so I'm sure there'll be cards flying in the post and everything. But yeah,
Indeed. Thanks, Steve. Good morning. Yep, I'm head of compliance here at WPS Advisory. Been with WPS Advisory since we started out in 2015. Prior to that, Oval. Prior to that, many years at an insurer. So basically, all my working life, I've been in pensions and advice industry in one form or another. And as I said, we currently head of compliance here at WPS Advisory. Was involved when we set up the business, getting our advice processes in place. So an awful lot of interactions we've had over the years with the FCA, given the nature of the business that we do in particular.
brilliant. Okay, and Simon, the same thing, I guess, for other people that may not know who you are, or
Yeah, I'm the CEO WPS Advisory. Responsible for bringing Richard with me from Oval. Richard's quite right. The nature of the business that we do is complex, and it has resulted in multiple interactions with regulators over the years. And here's Padraig there, so he's made his way in. And the reality today is my job is to try not to take the limelight away from Richard, who's our in-house expert in this area, and to support him as and when he would like me to. So thanks for everybody for coming along. So
yeah, no, thanks for that. That's really good. Padraig, do you want to unmute and introduce yourself? Hopefully you can hear us.
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. Hello. As you know, Steve, I'm travelling, so I'll do my best to keep connected, and I'd like to jump off somewhere.
Yep.
But what do you want to know?
We're just doing introductions. Yeah, I mean, obviously,
I'll be right
most people know you, but just for people that don't know you, just a short summary of who you are.
Sure.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, I'm a freelance journalist. I've been writing about this stuff for 25 years, and I'm still waiting for it to get better. So that's it in a nutshell.
Great. Okay, cool. Excellent. Well, thanks for that introduction. So turning to the specific questions, we are of the, we are of the opinion that there's an interesting survey that's come out from the FCA recently to a number of national and regional IFAs and a number of networks to do with, and it's a survey. We've been told it's a survey, but there's been a little bit of rumblings in the jungle on this one. So first of all, I suppose question to Richard. Let's start with Richard. Why is the survey being issued now? Why do we think the survey is being issued now?
That's a interesting question, Steve. I think what we're seeing is a lot more activity from the FCA. It's not the only survey they have issued in the last few weeks. They're asking for information about complaints as well from other firms. So they are far more active, and I think the simple matter is they have consumer duty written in law, which is their stick to beat people. The previous initiatives, treating customers fairly or fair treatment of customers, it was a please be nice type approach, and now they've got their stick that they obviously feel they need to enforce that please be nice approach.
Yeah. Okay. Simon, do you want to go next? What's your view?
Yeah, I think in terms of why now, I think we've also got to look back and saying, did the FCA tell us they were going to do this? I mean, obviously there was a lot of chat around consumer duty, but I think you've got to look back to their letter of the 22nd of December, their portfolio letter to financial advisors, which set out 4 priorities for the FCA this year in terms of where there would be activity. And this particular survey, the one around value for money and services to existing and ongoing customers, was identified as one of their 4 initiatives for the year arising out of their business plan. I think Richard's quite right. They now have a framework in law for something which you would have almost expected existed in regulation. You know, it doesn't really, it belies common sense. Expect regulation and the advisors to be clear that their objective is to provide a value for money service to individuals and to deliver that service in terms of what they're being paid for. So in that sort of sense, I think you should do a little bit of context around it, and that this was coming. It was always coming. But the question we've got to really, for me, to ask is, why does it, you know, why are we shocked? Why did a regulator have to publish a document for something that they were supposed to have been regulating for a long time? And I think I'm hand over to Padraig there, because I know it's a point he gets really passionate about. So Padraig, over to you.
If you mute, you're on mute, Padraig. So hopefully you can. Hopefully you can. There we go.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, it is a bugbear of mine, because I get upset when they say that it's something that's been coming a long time. But frankly, it should have been something on day one. But it's written into the stone of the foundations of the FCA. Surely consumer duty is all about, and what the industry has kind of done, muddled along with pitiful little help and guidance from the FCA over the years. Now, I expected something like consumer duty to be the cornerstone of what they wanted to achieve. And I think it's irrelevant whether it's written into law or not, because as regulators, they create the culture of regulation and compliance. And it's up to them to lead. And unfortunately, I don't think they've led at any point to failure creative. They lack proactivity, and they're not effective for that reason. So whether it's written in law or not, I think they should have been creating culture for compliance to this in any case. There you go.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. I mean, for everybody's benefit, this survey actually focuses in on data requests for ongoing advisor charge. We call it in the industry OAC, and this is an agreed terms and conditions signed between the client and the advisor for initial and recurring fees and ongoing advisor charge. So I think that the sort of the hidden agenda here, and maybe come back to Richard, is what is the purpose of this survey? What is the hidden agenda? And ultimately, will it add value to clients? Or is this just basically saying, well, if you've got an agreed service, you should provide it, and if you don't provide it, then you could be in trouble. And the big point on here, of course, is you might be thinking, well, this actually is, the data request was for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. No, it's 7 years. So it's a big, big crunch. Richard, what do you think about the purpose of this survey,
Sure.
the hidden agenda, and will it actually add value? I mean, going forward.
I think, what amazed me was the 7 years. That felt particularly tough, and as we've heard, not granting extensions for people to give them more than 2 weeks to gather that information is challenging, because it's, whilst people will no doubt have individual records of the reviews they've carried out, whether it's all in one place and can be evidence, it's probably not something that people would have foreseen. So I think it's quite brutal. I think, what is there? I think it's probably on a couple of levels. The first thing is, are firms doing what they say they're doing, what they tell their clients they're doing, and hence the reference to the value for money that was made in that portfolio letter at the back end of 2022. So that's certainly, there is a degree, I think, of that it being at face value, but clearly they're looking for information. This was focused on the 20 largest advice firms. You can't help but think there's reasons why they've chosen to look at the 20 largest firms rather than a so-called random selection across the industry as a whole, to get a wider picture. So you kind of feel there's a degree of concern in those particular areas. And for me, you can't help but wonder what's the longer term game going on here. Seen Billy's comments, absolutely. That's the key, is what's the value of can advisors evidence value from there. What would perhaps worry me is the next step for me is, given several years ago we had advisor charging come in rather than commissions. The next question has got to be, why does one client pay twice as much for the same service as another client, simply because they happen to have twice as much money sat with you? And I would almost be waiting for that step to come along at some point in the future. So I think that might be where we're going.
That is a bit of a can of worms, because obviously the argument on that would be, well, it's twice the risk. If there was ever a complaint, your PI risk, your professional indemnity risk, is twice as much. So therefore, a higher fee would necessarily be to pay. Obviously, people, maybe Billy or somebody else, might come back and say, well, that's not fair, but that's my opinion. Simon, what do you think about this? The purpose of this survey. Will it add value, and is there an underlying underlying skepticism that this is just another bullet that's going to come to the IFA sector, which will affect individual, retail, but also occupational pensions? Master Trust members, DB members, DC members, everybody's going to be affected. If this bites, this is going to affect everybody. What do you think, Simon?
I'll come back to the skepticism at the end of the thing, but I think in the first instance, I just want to relay my understanding of it. What I believe was a very similar exercise that happened in Australia, where a very similar piece of work was done, and I do wonder whether or not the experience in Australia has driven the regulator here, and the regulators obviously across the different jurisdictions do speak. And my understanding in Australia is, when they did this same survey and got into firms, that where firms were unable to prove that they had provided the service in the way that it was promised, and Richard was quite right to say it's going to be very precise to the actual agreement between the firm and the client. It's my understanding that they had to refund the fee they charged for a service that they had not delivered. Okay, so the first thing is whilst it's not in the UK, it would appear that there is here a track record of regulators around the world looking at this and perhaps finding that it doesn't quite work as they anticipated it would work. So for any firm in this area, we know that the FCA is due to publish their work on the retirement income review, so the how people get supported in retirement and so on and so forth. We know that's coming out. They've triggered this survey. They benchmarked what they would be doing. in the portfolio letter to financial advisors in December. So all of that's there. So you can turn around and you can say, well, look, is there a good reason? You can argue that there's a good reason, and from there. But looking at it more widely, if I came to almost a cynical view, we seem to have regulation evolving, bringing new challenges, and we have that happening at the time when the general population in the UK needs advice more than ever, because they're not supported in the same way with the death of defined benefit schemes, the changes to the state pension, other ability to save as cost of living goes up, etc. We're starting to come into generations that need help more than ever before. And what's happening here is we're seeing the regulation drive that support out of the market. One of the FCA's key objectives is to ensure that there is a thriving and effective market for people to get the help that they need. And if you look at the number of financial advisors in the market now, that's diminishing quickly. I also wonder, we talked last week on this, as to whether small firms can continue to trade in this market. And if I was really cynical, I would probably agree with the view that was expressed last week, that arguably what all of this does is it actually makes the market easier to regulate, because there's no room for the small advisor. And actually small advisors can be really innovative. It's where people can, having learned their trade, they can really start to use that experience to help people. And so kind of cynicism, does this take out small players and make the market easy to regulate? It would appear to be that that's there. Is it possible that the regulator is acting in a way that is absolutely not in order with its priorities? Yes. But is there a reason for the regulator to do this? Evidence would suggest there is. And so it's something we have to kind of take on the chin and work our way through. I just hope that when they do it, they're reasonable. And what they don't do, it's great to learn and keep the expertise in the market, because we all want to learn and get better. If this is just about collecting fines and making themselves look like they're doing something in a market that they were already supposed to be regulating, then that's going to be incredibly disappointing, and it'll help nobody. Now, I know
cheers, Simon.
Padraig's going to put something up in there, because I know Padraig's
go on, Padraig.
passionate about that as
and
well.
then we'll actually then come to Billy, because I think Billy's made a good couple of points. But go on, Padraig.
You're on mute, Padraig.
Unfortunately, the way the regulator tends to do business these days is to, like many other regulators, is to fine people because they're simple metrics to measure. And also they seem to be following the same kind of logic as TPL on the occupational side, because it's easier for them to regulate smaller numbers. Now, the problem with that, the problem I've got with it as well, is that FCA has never understood it's not a simple box product. It doesn't make any effort to try and do so. And so therefore it tries to make everything fit its narrow agendas and doesn't work, and therefore it appears to be doing nothing, or arguably it's doing nothing except harming people. Now, and that's a problem, because if by squeezing out all the small players, they become extremely effective by consumer protection, then that's fine. But this doesn't happen in banking. It's all the big companies that call them the biggest problems in banking. And let's face it, within advisory, if there are some not inconsiderate simple size companies that have had their legs smacked for treatment of customers, it's not small advisor that was gouging people from them off. Now, there have been some particularly nasty highlights that arguably FCA allowed to happen with something like this. They should have been more proactive in the aid side, but they weren't. So I think they're choosing to go down the same route of making everything simple for them. So they have considerably less work to do, but I think they could be doing more there.
Okay.
They haven't done it well so far.
Yeah. I think that the signal was quite bad, actually, Padraig. We're struggling to hear some of what you just said, but might be an idea to leave and redial in maybe and see if you can come back on that. But So the first hand up was, oh, actually, Paul, you're the first hand up, or we can kind of Billy. Paul, you're number one apparently on my hand list. So you come in first, Paul, and then we'll go to Billy. What would you like to say?
Well, I don't want to hold us up from Billy, but yeah, I wonder if I can offer a thought. I've been debating this a bit online with a few financial planners, and I wonder if there's a perspective here. Perhaps I'm giving the FCA too much credit for their thinking, but there could be a good outcome here. And I think, we generally agree to Simon's point that we've got an advice market that's too small and is shrinking. So that's not a good thing. And, I've seen the debates on LinkedIn and elsewhere that, we can't get new blood into the industry, young qualified people into the industry, because no one wants to pay salaried, or it is rare for these people to be offered good, graduate type salaries to come into the industry at the front end. And then at the back end, we've got a boom industry called exit consultancy, which is helping, those who are, and most are, be honest, either my age or a bit or approaching it, to get out of the industry. So we've got a real problem, haven't we, with the supply of advice. And I wonder whether, to Simon's point about the duty of the FCA in supporting a thriving market, that some of that is not in here, in that, if you undermine the value of a business, the exit value of a business, by saying, well, it's not worth all that because you're not actually earning that revenue, then you might stem the flood out the back door. If you say, yeah, all right, Simon, yeah, it's a long shot, I know, but the more interesting, the more interesting one is the front end, surely. So, if you're going to fine people for not giving an ongoing service, well, firms are going to start giving the ongoing service, aren't they? And they're going to have to recruit people probably more service oriented than sales minded people to provide that ongoing service. So it might well bring a lot of new blood into the industry. So I am hopeful that this will help but I don't dismiss the fact that it's going to be ruddy painful, and going back 7 years looks like a long ask. Just one final thought, and I've written an article on this, which I'm happy to share later if anyone's interested. I actually think the people to blame for this problem are the rich, right? So if somebody with 5 million quid in his pension fund or whatever in his personal wealth is happy to pay £50,000 a year for not much advice, why should people get out of bed and give a better service? I know a lot of good advisors. I've amused Billy here. I know a lot of advisors who do a damn good job, and they do earn their 1% or 0.7% a year. I do know those people. I know a lot of them, right? But let's be honest, there's a few that don't do it, and those are the people the FCA are after. But I blame the rich. So I think we need to wake up the rich to say, I'm not paying you 50 grand a year. I'll pay you 10, all right, £800 a month. And then people might be more inclined to do a bit more work and improve the supply of advice. That's my 2 pence.
Okay, well, before we go to Billy, Richard, your thoughts on that, and then we'll go to Simon. Yeah, go on.
I think it's comments you make about people coming into the industry is interesting. I suspect a lot of us may have come into the advice part of the industry through the good old direct sales forces when they existed. Yeah, Paul nodding there, which sadly no longer exists. Now it seems to be the paraplanner is the route that typically is used, and we have recently ourselves recruited a few graduates as trainees. So I think there is the interest in there, but you made the other point I noted, Paul, was the comment about getting people involved who want to provide a service, not sales. And I think in a way that almost speaks to the problems of the industry, that we've been a sales industry because that's just how it worked. We haven't been a service industry. And it's, you know, the more, but equally the challenge is, you know, in one sense, the problem isn't the rich people. They're prepared to pay for advice. It's the
problem is the poor people.
But they're paying too much, Richard. They're paying too much. I mean, I went to see a financial planner a year ago about helping him with marketing, and he said, you know what, Paul, I really don't need to do this. I've got 40 clients. You know, they're paying me between 10 and 20 grand a year. Why do I need to bother with marketing? So, you know, there's a real issue here with people paying too much.
No, I absolutely agree, and almost that goes back to my earlier point about the concept of percentage charging being potentially in the sights of the FCA. What is that person getting for their 50,000 that warrants a fee of that level? I think you're quite right. So, I think there is opportunities for people to join the industry, and in a sense, it's interesting that the FCA has written to the 20 largest firms who perhaps are likely to be in a position to, you know, to source our future advisors, to provide the training grounds for those future advisors by dealing with existing clients, by not having the pressure of a sale hanging over them.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Simon?
I want to break it into two sections. The first one is, I'm a fan of consumer duty. I'm almost ashamed that we have to have it written down, because to me it feels like it's something we should always have been doing. And it very much is about culture. You know, I've seen the FCA raise issues, which is, you know, advisors should consider whether or not percentage charging is how it should work. It doesn't say it can't. It says just think about it. And similarly, in looking at how we provide ongoing services and making sure they're value for money, that in itself is something I almost think, well, surely we would have been doing that anyway. If you're a firm and you're demonstrating the right culture, surely you want to know that you're providing good services to your customers, and particularly in what we do, because a lot of recommendations are word of mouth. Oh, I've got a financial advisor, they're really helpful to me, they're there when I need them, you know, and they carry the overheads, etc., all the time, so that they can be there when I need them. And that's one aspect of it. And I think I would want to turn around and strongly say, I'm a big fan of it, but it should have always been there. What my question would more be about is how the regulator works to bring it to life now that they've documented it and written it down. Because if it's going to be big stick, right, and almost same again as some of the things we've seen in the past, that's going to destroy an industry, right? It's going to continue to devalue the industry. It's going to continue to devalue the people that have been in it. It's going to continue to make it difficult. If they drive down margins to the point where there's no commercial, gain in it, how are you going to bring the new blood in? Because that's my responsibility as an employer to kind of get that balance right. What I don't understand, and it's almost a clarion call, is why the regulator finds it impossible to consult in a way that creates change. Their only method, as far as I can see, of creating change seems to think if I hit it harder, it might get back up, right? They can't keep hitting it. At some point, for me, and this is what this is about, the whole point of this debate is the regulator coming and dealing with this in a way that is productive, right? And for me, that's where this is. And a lot of the points you raised, Paul, are about sustainability, continuity, culture, and that's exactly what it's supposed to be about. And so we don't have many of these forums, but for me, these forums should be looking to push the focus back to the FCA and say, okay, then you've documented it. We like it. It's positive. Then let's work together to make it work. And let's not just repeat history, where in actual fact, you come in 5 years after something's happened. You then say, well, you know what? I might be 5 years late, but what I'll do is I'll be penal. Because how does that help, right? You know, we've got to find a better way of doing this, and the regulator's got to find a better way of creating what it's supposed to, which is a thriving, vibrant market of integrity, so that a consumer can know that they can get help from us when they need it. And that's important. So I don't know if I'll pass back to you, Steve, now to go to Billy, because he's had his hand up for ages.
Yeah, okay. Billy, go on. Over to you, Billy.
No, nothing terribly exciting. I mean, I thought Paul made some really good points, and I've got to be careful what I say, because I'm advising people and giving, ongoing advice, and I have to sort of, practice what I preach. But let me give you a little scenario which I think sort of fleshes this out. You know, where's the added value? So a client comes along and let's say he's got a couple of 100,000 and it's bread and butter stuff. I want to retire. I want to take my tax-free cash. I don't want to take any income. I'm going to transfer him into a new provider because he's with Reassure or somebody. So we set him up, fills in a risk questionnaire. And one of my solutions, for example, may be something like, Aviva or AJ Bell into a managed, portfolio. So fine, a good fee for getting it set up. Then the managed portfolio is rebalanced by the provider. They make all the investment decisions. As an advisor, what value can I actually give on an ongoing basis to that investment? Now, um, so and you can see where Paul is dead on. If you've got a £500,000 and you stick it into one of these managed portfolios, it's quite difficult, I think, as an advisor to justify, a huge fee for that. And I mentioned PruFund. PruFund's a good one. How could you, justify it? Now, I think where it does work, and this is, my approach, is I'm moving on to fixed fees for clients. I'm saying what I'm going to do for you every quarter. I'm going to have a look at your portfolio. A big part of what I do is actually translating some of the reports from the insurance companies into language that people can understand. Also, part of what I'm doing is actually giving them the information that they want and can digest. And I think this is the get out of jail card for most people. I think if you can charge an ongoing fee and not just be narrow on looking at the investments, but saying, you pay me a fee, ask me any questions you want about anything else, ask about your ISAs, ask about anything else. I think if you can open up the fee to be more than just narrowly homing in on the investments, you can then actually start to justify and give some really good value to the ongoing fee. So I don't know if that makes sense to anybody.
Yeah, I mean, interesting point, Richard. What's your comment on that?
I think that is an interesting point when you talk about, if you like, almost selecting a fit and forget type of product. It then does make much more. What is it? What's the other stuff that I'm doing for my client? The more important element, and it does go back almost in a relative simplistic sense to what do I tell my client I'm going to do for them when I set up an agreement, and can I then evidence I'm doing it? And in our own business, we have a significant number of clients where we give them a fit and forget because they're not going to be touching their benefits for a number of years. They perhaps don't have other assets that would require that ongoing advice to sit around it, so they don't take an ongoing fee. Whereas others that are perhaps withdrawing money, need ongoing advice, support, tax advice, etc., we are doing that. So I think if your service differentiates for the client who's just dropped the money in the PruFund versus the chap who is actively withdrawing or is looking to get money into or out of ISAs or whatever it is, and there's a wider service, absolutely that's exactly what you need to be doing. Is can I evidence I'm doing something for my money, that I'm offering my client value? It's almost, we shouldn't just be taking money. I saw one comment online, someone saying that, well, what about my CPD? I'm doing that so that I'm around if the client needs me. And I'm thinking, well, I don't pay a subscription to Tesco's in case I want to go and buy a loaf of bread. I'll pay the price of the loaf of bread when I need it. And I think some people seem to think that because they did the original investment, they deserve the ongoing fee for no good reason. And that is, in a sense, what perhaps a culture that people need to consider, and perhaps that's where this FCA is challenging us, that we've grown fat or we've grown used to just taking an ongoing fee because it's what we do, and that certainly should be challenged.
Yeah, No, I agree. Okay. Just focusing on consumer duty itself, and this is a point I think a lot of people are passionate about. We might bring, obviously, try and get Padraig back onto the call. It's only 8 months since consumer duty came in, 1st of July 2023. Did they get it wrong? Did the FCA get consumer duty wrong? And this is 2 questions. And the second question is possibly like the analogy that Simon gave. Should this have been introduced, consumer duty-esque style instructions be introduced in 2012? You know, are we now 13 years, 12 years down the road? You know, so what's the answer to that? What did they get consumer duty wrong, and should they have brought it in much earlier? Padraig, do you want to unmute and see if you want to answer that one?
Well, can you hear me now, Steve?
Yes, that's a bit better. Yeah, a bit better. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, fine. Well, should they? Well, I think I said earlier on, it's the kind of thing that I would have thought was central to their very existence and should have been done from the start. What I don't get, so on the street there, off the track. One thing I don't get is that now the part of their new remit is to help support people that are suffering from cost of living crisis. Well, I think this just highlights the problem FCA has had from the beginning. And to be fair, I think SA had a bit of trouble with this as well. Is to actually screw down what their core competencies should be, and then apply them to the market. I think that's really what's been lacking in their duty so far, because it's one thing to protect people from the bad things that can go on with bad actors or even incompetence in the market, but you can't stop people from suffering because markets do turn down, or there are geopolitical influences which affect us. So I think it just is an indicator of what's gone wrong with FCA from the beginning, as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't really stick to its knitting and excel at what should be its core duties, and therefore give people the lead and create a culture of regulation and compliance that should strengthen practice and also protect consumers.
Yep, agree. Simon, what do you think? Is consumer duty completely? You know, did they get it wrong? Have they got consumer duty wrong?
I'm a fan. I love consumer duty. For me, as an industry, we should look at it and say, if a regulator ever had to really write that down, what were we doing, right? Because I don't understand why it isn't the default setting in that sort of sense. So I have no issue with consumer duty. I'm a big fan of it. I'm particularly a big fan of making it clear that someone has to understand what you're saying to them and be able to play that back to you and make informed decisions. For me, they're incredibly important. It's the execution. It's the way that the FCA go around and the FCA's behaviour and culture, the way that they go around getting this executed. That for me is an area of focus. How are they going to work with an industry to help the industry to meet the objectives of consumer duty? Because destroying it on the way is not going to play well for a consumer. It isn't. It's all very well to say we're representing the interest of consumer in driving good practice. Brilliant. We all want that. But in actual fact, if the way you behave is to achieve the opposite, then surely you've got to look at yourself. And I would go back to almost saying to the FCA, look, you're trying to do the right thing. We all want to do the right thing. We can do it better together, right? But if you just want to come and enter our houses and our businesses because you want to make a point that says we regulate because we fine, or we regulate because we bash somebody every so often, right? Just to prove we do it, then that's not how it should work. And so from that sort of perspective, I would much prefer to see the regulator be much more active in helping us to achieve the things that we all know are good, right? And not just using it as a penal system, right? Which, you know, it may be fair, it may be unfair, but, you know, the amount of these dialogues and discussions and debates that I've been into where people feel that their relationship with the FCA is, I think you used the phrase last week, which I've used myself in the past, Steve, guilty until proven innocent, right? Yeah. Which is one of my favourite phrases. You know, I think I'd like to see that rebalanced and to see a positive dialogue and having done that positive dialogue, having had that positive dialogue, if we as an industry don't respond in the right way, then fine, deal with it, you know. But don't start off by bringing the big stick.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, moving on a little bit. So what do you think the outcomes of this survey will be? What evidence will advisors be providing? What will the FCA be saying to the market? And this is all about systems and process, or is it a bigger issue than that?
Richard, do you want to start on there?
Richard?
No?
Yeah, I think clearly, well, we would hope we will get some clear steer for what their expectations are. As Simon said, one of the challenges with dealing with them has always been they won't tell you what good looks like. They'll just tell you what was bad after the event, despite attempts to engage with them to that effect. So, what's the outcome going to be? I guess in a way we should be asking those 20 firms that have got to provide the responses. In that regard, I suspect there's a range of comfort within those firms in terms of the evidence that they have available to them, or range of discomfort. So there is obviously a clear message, and it would be silly to sit here and for us to say, well, we'll just sit here and wait until that comes out. We need to be able to evidence what we're doing, and certainly make sure what we're doing, we're evidencing what we're doing going forward in an effective way. And I think, Simon said, I think Consumer Duty's brought that home. I think Consumer Duty, yeah, it's sad it was needed, but that unfortunately is the world we live in. And sadly, it's not the people on this call that are ones that are causing that. I would suspect it's those who choose to not engage with this kind of debate. So what's going to happen? I suspect we will see this. This is in effect, I would see as their evidence gathering stage. We will see instruction from them, or guidance, as they'll no doubt phrase it, as to what we should be doing.
But do you see this as a pathway to fining IFA firms, or a pathway to full refunds, and not just refunds for the last year, but the last 7 years, where service hasn't been given? And I probably get the fact that, you know what, if you take your car in for a service and they don't do a service, you shouldn't pay for it. So, I get that. And that maybe is a failure of the systems and processes of the IFA itself. Although one of my other beefs, of course, is, well, if you've gone to a client and said, would you like a review, and the client says no, what's the definition of no? I.e., if you've done a review anyway on file, but it's still a no, is that what the FCA mean? Or if the client just says no, do you just park it for another quarter, another half year, another year, and go, oh, I'll go back to the client in a year's time and I'll take the £2,000, please, thank you very much? So all I'm worried about, and I think some of the industry's worried about, is what does no mean? What's the definition of a review, and what's the definition of no? Because they might say, well, sorry, that's not good enough, you still got to refund 100 grand worth of fees, and to a small IFA, that's a big chunk of number.
Yeah. Excuse me. I think there is a real danger there. I would be concerned whether it's 100% of the fee. I think, again, it comes back to the point of, what have I said I'm going to do for that fee, and what attempts have I made to engage with a client to deliver the service that I said I was going to. And that, I would expect that most firms would be able to say, well, we've carried out a review of your portfolio, your provider, your investments. We have done some work. Yep. So I would certainly, I hope, and it's on the negative side, but I would hope they would reflect the work that has been done in setting out the degree of any refunds that have been that they feel are appropriate. I don't think it's a matter of, did you speak to your client every year? No. Okay, in that case, you've got it's 100% of the fee. That would feel incredibly unfair and potentially, open to challenge. It's the people who can't evidence that they've done anything that are perhaps more at risk.
Yeah. Simon, you got a view on that?
Yeah, I want to bring in a different factor to that in terms of the value that financial advisors add. Just recently, people that I play football with have suddenly realised for some reason that that's a job that I do, and they've started asking me about it, right? And whereas normally I just wouldn't have mentioned it, and it's because one of the lads that I'm playing football with he now works with us as well, and he said, "Oh, I work with Simon," right? And they all knew what he did. But and three of the people that I've spoken to, they're all clients of St James's Place, right? Now, the easy thing to do is to turn around and say, "Oh, let's bash that. They must be paying a lot of money," and so on and so forth. And they've all said to me, "Oh, well, this is what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah." And for each and every one of them, and I've said, I've just taught them and I've not made any effort. I haven't said, "Oh, come and work with us," or anything like that. I've just left it alone. And each and every one of them talked about something called peace of mind, right? That they all understand that they're paying good fees, right? So whoever their specific advisor is within that St James's Place business has made it clear what they're paying. That's good. It means that they know. So they all knew it was quite expensive. And what they all liked was if something went wrong, then they could get hold of that advisor and they'd almost be there immediately, right? So peace of mind, value for money, understanding what you're paying for. Now, I would argue that for each of those three individuals, right, you could look at a technical piece of thing and say, well, you didn't quite do what you said you would do, right? But what about the consumer view in each of these? How are the FCA going to take into that consumer view? Because what I would say to you is that with each of those three, what they set out, I basically said to them, look, you like it, you trust the person, keep asking questions, but why would you change? Why would you do that? Because it's a very personal thing that this individual is working with you, and you trust them, and that's there. So it's the intangibles that I think the FCA sometimes struggle with. If it's about ticking a box, did that happen? Did that happen? Did that happen? That's one thing. But the FCA are saying, right, that you have to evidence an informed decision. An informed decision to like that service is still an informed decision. So how are the FCA, in identifying what good culture is, how are they going to take into account that interface with the end consumer? Because like I said, in each of those cases, I could have said, "Oh, you're paying through the nose. We can do it, better. We can, more cost effectively. That might represent more value for money." But actually, that wouldn't have been the right thing to do. And again, my interest is, more from the FCA as to how it is that they expect and would really like to see that reflected in the relationship with the end consumer. Because at the end of the day, that's the one that matters.
Well, isn't that a big point? Isn't the big point? Oh, we've identified and evidence that, you haven't had the best of service from your IFA, Mr. Client, Mr. Consumer. We want to refund X of fees. If they go to the consumer directly and say, "Are you happy with the service that you're getting and the relationship you've got with your IFA?" and they say, "Yes," does that get the IFA off the hook? Because that's what we're saying, isn't it? Are we not saying that, well, actually, the FCA might say it's a bad thing, but if the client says, "Well, actually, I think our IFA is best thing since sliced bread. Why do you want to screw that IFA for $5,000 or 10 grand of refunds?" True or false? Go on, Richard.
I would there draw the parallel, albeit it's a slightly extreme one, of the British Steel pension scheme, where there's been a number of reports of my client says he's perfectly happy with the advice I gave him, but because he knows there's compensation on the table, he thinks he'd be a fool not to take it.
Yeah, I get that, but the difference is it's the evidence that Simon's talking about. The FCA gets the evidence from the consumer themselves. So it's
they
not.
Don't.
Yeah, but should they? But should they?
Yeah, and that's my point.
It's a half-baked job. It's a half-baked job.
Yeah,
if you haven't seen the other side.
It is. If in a world where the evidence hurdle is that the individual has made an informed choice, they understand the service they're getting, what they're paying, how that can move around, and particularly the risks that they're taking, right? If that's the FCA's parameters, how do you sit in a room in Stratford with a bunch of contracts and in actual fact make a decision that in actual fact is not an informed decision? I think that one of the biggest challenges for the FCA that they've got to address is understanding that they changed their own world too, not just the industries. So now what I want to see from the FCA is come on then, You've talked about informed decisions. You've talked about making clear everything's tailored. You've talked about shorter, sharper communications that people understand. Where's your consumer testing? Where is it that you've gone on that side of things to, in actual fact, say this is what good looks like? Because I don't think that they have done that, right? I think they've continued in their own vein. And Paul's got his hand up and he wants to jump in there, Paul. So please do, because otherwise I'll talk for Europe, never mind England. So it'd be great if you did.
Well, Simon, you've just said what I wanted to just mention, which Richard mentioned a moment ago. So I think we really need to push back on the FCA on this. Right, which is, what does good look like? I was at a PFS meeting at Celtic Manor, I don't know, whenever it was, 8-10 years ago, and their chief policeman, I forget what his name is, a big Scottish guy, was waxing lyrical about how advisors, he was talking to an audience of 300 advisors, right, and telling them how they were all bad guys for giving unsuitable investment advice. This was the thing of the time. Do you remember this one? You know, unsuitable products. I forget what it was, 2011, something like that. And he was going on about it and ad nauseum. So I put my hand up and I said, Bill, whatever your name is, I said, what's the guidance from the FCA on what good looks like? Oh, no, he says, we can't give that. We don't give that at the FCA. I mean, you know, if we gave that and things went wrong and consumers had a complaint, who would they look to? Oh, yeah. Who would they look to? Right. So the FCA are playing a game here, which is, we're not going to tell you what good looks like because we don't want to be on the hook for it. Right. So I think you've got to push back on those boys and say, come on, you didn't want to give it last time on the other issues. On this issue, give us a clue, right? Stop saying it's a free market and you do what you like. And to Richard's words, we'll smack you after the event. No, you do your research. Tell us, give us a rough idea of what good looks like, and we'll work around that framework. But this game has to stop. You know, we're not going to tell you what good looks like. It's had its day. It never had its day, did it? It's got to stop.
Paul, I've got to say,
they can do it.
Yeah. Go on.
Sorry, they can do it. They've done it twice. They did it on TR 1412 on pension transfers, and then did it on GC 20/1 again in the field of pension transfers. So they can do it if they choose to do it, right? So the fact that they can and they haven't is playing to the point you're making. They don't want to, right? And that's the bit that's got to be addressed. And we've got a Consumer Duty Alliance now led by Keith Richards that is very focused on this area. So I almost think get in with Keith and support that, even with the advice task force that they're building. Get in and do that, because if we don't go and talk to them, it'll continue the way that it's always been. And I want to bring Padraig in here because I love listening to Padraig as well. And I'm sorry for stepping on you there, Steve.
Do what you like. Yeah,
I didn't mean to. We just started at the same time, and my mouth's quicker. So from there, so I don't know if we can bring Padraig in for a comment there, because I think Padraig will write stuff on this, and I think that actually the focus should be, come on then, you want to achieve good, come and work with us and achieve good, and they'll only do it when they come under pressure. In the same way as when they came under pressure on the likes of British Steel, they reacted. So Padraig, you would like to come in on that one?
Yeah, well, Chris, we're absolutely of one mind on that. I mean, one of the biggest problems I've had, and I think I've touched on a couple of times this morning, is that consistently the FCA has refused to regulate and draw a line in the sand on many issues. We still don't know what they think guidance or advice means, for instance. You know, I've been having that conversation since I first started writing about this stuff a quarter of a century ago, and it's just unwillingness to actually grasp the nettle and set things down that can then be later adjusted, rather than moving the goalposts on everybody else. They seem to wish to do it. It's what one of my biggest bugbears has been with this regulator. So yes, they need to have the courage of their convictions, put down in guidance what they actually mean, and then regulate, use their oversight against it, rather than asking people to second guess what they may mean in the future if they ever update guidance, or at such point in the future when they promise a review of guidance, change it and then and slap everyone's legs because everyone's not been doing what they suddenly decided they would do in the future. I'm just absolutely, I don't know how people can operate in this market. It's actually driving me mad. So yes, I'm completely with you on that.
We've got 4 or 5 minutes left. So, I mean, I think, you know, the big question for the panel and for everybody, has the FCA failed?
Should I start?
Go on then.
If it doesn't change the way that it engages with the industry, yes, because you can't look at its history and suggest that it's successful, right? I want the FCA to succeed because I know that if it does, and we work with it, there are better outcomes for consumers. But acting in a way that diminishes the value of the industry and reduces the access to service and advice, because there are, as there are in any industry, a small number of bad actors, is not right. And they need to address that, in my view.
Right. Okay. Richard, your view?
Thanks, Billy.
Very much aligned with Simon. Yeah, yeah, it's you keep looking at the handbook, that 1,000+ pages, 10,000+ pages rather, that they've written. Surely, if they were getting it right, that would be good. Having said that, on the flip side, why is it that handbook is now so many thousands of pages? Yes, they may not have regulated effectively, but would we be having issues with British Steel where miners were told to go and invest in overseas properties or whatever, things like that? Is it a failure of the regulator there, or is it a failure of people who were authorised advisors? So yes, they're not great.
Well, hang on, this is a regulator that was going to ban DB transfers, wasn't it? So if they'd banned DB transfers, there would never have been a British Steel debacle, would there?
It was,
but I do agree.
Without getting sidetracked, I think the British Steel. I think there's others more guilty that have got off scot-free on British Steel than either. Okay. Not the advisors or the regulator there. But
okay. The flip side of the question, because it's nice to debate this. The flip side is, has the industry, i.e. the IFA industry, brought this upon themselves?
Go on, Richard. This is one of your favourite things.
This is one of your favourite topics. Yeah, go on.
It kind of is, Simon touched on earlier. When you look at the 4 cross-cutting rules, and avoid foreseeable harm, act in the best interest of your consumers. It almost beggars belief that has to be written down as at this point in time as a requirement. And you kind of think, are there, as I said earlier, probably the people here want to do it right. Are there that many people out there that are justifying that? So I do think, sadly, the industry, I'm steeped in calling it an industry, and I'd love to call it a profession. That there are parts of the industry where the kind of approach they take is sadly necessary. There's no getting away from it. You look at some of the FOS findings, complaints findings, and you think, why did anyone ever think that was a good idea? So
yeah, no, I get that. Billy, you got your hand raised, and we're running out of time. But go on, Billy, what's your question?
Just very quickly, in response to your question, have IFAs brought it on themselves or advisors? I see 2 groups of people. I see advisors who are passionate about helping their clients, and Paul and Simon, you're all involved in this. And the trouble with the regulation is it actually gets in the way of actually giving clients what they really want. But on the other hand, there are advisors who are running the business for them, their own pockets, and these are the people who, a lot of them are giving the industry a bad name. So how can we get to a situation where regulation doesn't get in the way between us and giving our clients the sort of service that we know that they want? Yeah,
big point. Yeah. Padraig, do you want to sort of finish off with a summary of how you feel about this, and then we'll finish the meeting. There's a lot of other questions we've got, but we're sort of running out of time. But yeah, go on, Padraig. What are your final thoughts?
Okay, I'll keep it as brief as I can. But I mean, as far as the question is concerned about has it failed, yes, it has failed serially. But that doesn't mean it should fail in the future if it just pulls its finger out and readdresses some of these issues that it said it would do in the past and has singularly failed to do. Are there bad actors? Yes, there are bad actors. But the nature of any industry, and that's why we have a regulator, is that people will cut corners, bend the rules, and do naughty things. So some IFAs have spoiled it for the rest of the market. But that's what the regulator's there to do. Unfortunately, this regulator, going back to it again, has stood back and allowed things to happen. And I think British Steel is a good example. They should have been much more proactive on that when clearly there were people being bussed towards the rotating knives. But they didn't. They stood back and just let things, mature.
But hang on,
so I think
1994 was phase 1 of the pensions review. 1998 was phase 2 of the pensions review. How did British Steel happen? If you have a functioning and proactive regulator, that's 20 years. 25
as I've
years.
said, I don't think this regulator, as I've always complained, is neither proactive nor effective.
Okay.
It's a reactive, Old Testament God, and that has no place in the 21st century because it just means consumers, who should be the absolute centre of everything they do, are let down again. Because while they're going around smacking IFAs and other financial services entities with a stick, consumers get forgotten again. Yeah. So there you go. I think that's it, really. Yes, they've failed. They'll continue to fail until they do something better. Let's hope they do something better. I think it's more likely that a new government will come in and recreate FCA into something else.
Okay, one final question, because you've mentioned it. There's some people on this call involved, obviously, with a lot of us are involved with occupational pensions. Do we ever see one regulator, TPR and the FCA merging, or is that a tough nut to crack? Is that like a Higgs boson that isn't going to happen, or whatever?
I think it has to, Steve. I think it has to happen. It can't continue like it is. If you think about it, the masses of people, i.e. the people that you have to deliver the help to in this, with what's happening in the UK, the demographics, the economics, they tend to access particularly pension savings through occupational schemes, master trusts, etc. It's unsustainable to have the two regulators. At some point, we have to recognise that actually we've moved from cradle to grave to the age of individual responsibility, and we've got to deliver a framework that recognises that. I agree with Padraig, and I've said that for some time. In my view, the FCA is still living in the 80s. They're still regulating as if it's the 80s, as if people get to a certain stage in life and they've got all of this money there that's been put there for other people. It isn't like that now. Cost of living isn't temporary, right? And the Centre for Policy Studies issued some really, really, really scary data, just the other day, and the way that it's going to impact the UK. If we don't get this right now, if we don't get the framework right now, a hell of a lot of people are going to suffer, and the regulator's got to play their part in that. They can't continue in the way that they've been doing. And that isn't a criticism in the sense of you learn as you go, we all evolve, but we know that there's something critical coming up for so many people in the UK. We've got to get it right. We haven't got time to waste chasing history.
Yep, I agree. You're right. Well, that's a call to arms, as they say. So let's wrap it up there. Simon, thank you very much indeed. Richard, thank you very much. Padraig, thanks for your input as well, and thanks everybody for your questions. Please keep an eye out on developments in this space, because I think it's a big issue. But thanks to Richard, thanks to Simon, and thanks to Padraig for a great session. Actual clapping from Paul. So thank you, Paul, for that. And Billy, thank you for that, which is good.
Thanks, guys.
Next week, we have got Norma Cohen and Harry Scoffin, I think his name is, talking about occupational pensions and leasehold rents, and goodness knows what's been going on in Parliament this week. But Henry will be online next week to explain more. So watch out for an invite for next week. Thanks for joining today. If you're a Playpen member, please share and invite other friends. If you're not a Playpen member, please join. That would be lovely to see you. And as we usually say, let's pray for peace in the East and peace in the Middle East. And yes. Happy birthday, Richard, for tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Not bad for 27. So that's good. Excellent.
Absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks
Thanks
everybody.
everyone. Enjoy the rest of your
Bye.
day. Take
Thanks.
care. Bye. Bye.